Right. Hello everyone. My name is Rohan Sylvester. I'm an recruitment evangelist, and I'm part of the marketing team with Indeed. I'm extremely happy to be here, and I'm extremely happy to welcome all of you to the fifth episode of Top Jobs in India, an initiative to help people find jobs. A one of its kind series brought to you by Indeed and People Matters. For those of you who may not know, Indeed is the world's #1 job site with over 25 crore job seekers across the globe using us every month to find their next big opportunity. If you want the next great opportunity, just like the 25 crore other people across the globe, just log on to Indeed.com and start searching. Looking for a new job is one of the most difficult and stressful things that anyone has to do. There are so many things to consider. Will I be a perfect fit for the new job, for the new role? What is the culture of the company I'm going to be a part of? What will my onboarding process look like? And that's particularly true nowadays. And many more questions like this typically rattling around our brains while we're looking for and applying for new jobs across multiple companies. These questions are only amplified with everything happening virtually now. So we thought, why not give everyone a first-hand view of what it's like to work for some of the top companies in India? And that's why we decided to have this hiring week. This initiative is a small effort by us at Indeed to help job seekers understand a little better, and get a few insights into some of the top companies in India. With that, it is my pleasure to welcome our guest, Mr. Brijesh Balakrishnan. Brijesh is the SVP Global Head Talent Fulfillment at CSS Corp. With over 21 years of IT experience, Brijesh heads the Digital Engineering Services and Geographic Information System business units at CSS Corp, and is responsible for implementing best practices in services, delivery, and creating solutions across the industry. He also heads the talent acquisition and fulfillment function in the company. I'm going to be asking Brijesh some really interesting questions to ensure that all our viewers who have joined us today understand CSS Corp a little better after this session. So thanks for joining us, Brijesh, and thanks for taking the time today.
Thank you, Rohan. Thank you, Indeed and People Matters, for organizing this. And I'm really excited to be part of this talk. And I hope we can have a wonderful session going forward.
Thanks, Brijesh. Before we start with the questions, let me also give everyone all a quick introduction to CSS Corp. CSS Corp is a massive organization, really doesn't need an intro. But anyway, I'm just going to take a few seconds to explain the organization. CSS Corp is a global IT and digital services company with 8,000 employees across 18 global locations. The company leverages leading-edge technologies and business models to deliver world-class technology support and managed services that help its customers provide stellar customer experiences to their end consumers. To all our viewers, if you want to know anything specific about CSS Corp, please post your questions in the comment section, which is on the right side of your screen. If you're watching this episode either through Facebook or YouTube, just the section is usually on the right side. Feel free to post your questions. We'll try and answer most of them, so keep the questions flowing. And with that, we can get started with our questions to Brijesh. So Brijesh, my first question to you would be about helping us understand the work culture at CSS Corp. What does it look like? What is it like working at CSS Corp?
So CSS is what we believe and what we strongly try to inculcate and give the message that it's actually a new age services company. So that harnesses the power of digital technologies and to reimagine customer engagements. So we enable business to anticipate and face the disruptions effectively through our digital technologies, support services, and all of that. So while we provide the world-class support to our customers, we need to make sure that internally we are able to provide the same building blocks to who are part of the organization. So the whole focus and led by CEO Manish has been in the last many years has been to use technology in everything that we do. So my recent example would be that even when the pandemic struck, and it's very unfortunate, but when the pandemic struck and it became a reality in March, when we had to get on to a lockdown and a work from home mode, we ensured that the 100% work from home was enabled at the click of a button, and we became one of the first companies to do 100% work from home across the globe. And we didn't stop there. So we did not want to disrupt any of the normal operations that would happen in the normal way, which is including the talent acquisition and onboarding of people. So we did not have a single day of disruption of talent onboarding, new talent onboarding into the company. So there was lockdown in end of March, but we were hiring people, we were onboarding people. So, and I think that's the agility the company has displayed, and the agility that the company always wants to display. And I think that the using the power of digital, using the power of technology, and being agile in everything we do is the true phase of the company that we would want to demonstrate.
Thanks, Brijesh. It really sounds like CSS is a company that really cares about a lot of things: the employees, the work that you do, and the clients, ensuring that regardless of what's happening, you're able to give the level of care that matters. That's great to hear. So
Yeah.
we've been hearing a lot of talk about unemployment in the news lately. How do you foresee the overall job market in India shaping up in the next 6 to 9 months, specifically in your industry?
Yeah, so and it's actually strange that the pandemic has really brought the future forward. So, and at the forefront of the change is the very idea and the nature of work. So the remote meetings, the virtual collaboration, the virtual onboarding, the increased adoption of AI and automation, all of that were talked about pre-2020 March, but was never implemented in its totality. And the lockdown and the pandemic forced organizations to fast forward everything and implement that over the next 2 or 3 weeks, because otherwise they couldn't operate business. So we in fact, we say that all of the CXOs of the world were actually trying hard for the last 5 years to become digital, but actually the pandemic made the world really digital. So it's actually quite unfortunate that such a pandemic or a disease had to do this, but that's how certain realities finally turn out to be. So so in the way, if you really look at the different industries, right? So even I'll start with, let's say, retail industry. So there's the brick and mortar retail industry and versus the online retail industry. So if though the brick and mortar retail industry almost halted or almost do about 1/5 of the sale of what they used to do before, the online business has, for many companies, become 3 times. In fact, there are companies for it which it has become 5 times. So overall, they really look on very different Zoom. So if there was a company that was balanced well on online and non-online, they are doing just fine. If they were doing more of online, they are actually zooming up. But if they were not really using technology, then they are now on the catch-up game. So retail and high tech, for that matter, has been really shown all its power in the last 6 months or last 8 months. There are certain industries that got really hit and is still not recovered, like an aero industry, because almost no one is flying, or a tourism industry, or a manufacturing industry. But on the other side, the entire logistics industry, that's really doing way beyond what they used to do before. I talked about the online retail, the education in a digital way. That's really changing the way in which things are happening. The technology is what is really powering stuff. So anything that had adopted technology are industries that are really doing a different thing. Now, because IT and ITES is the industry that powers this technology, um, fortunately, in spite of all of the unfortunate things that are around us, from a pure industry standpoint, I don't think we've had as golden time as like this before. Might be the e-commerce boom that happened in 2000, or the Y2K boom that happened before that. There was smaller booms that happened, but the entire gamut of technology being used to redefine business, I don't think we've had a time as critical as this before. And this is not really going to stop now, because every industry has realized about how important technology is to drive business. Till now, people thought that there was only certain ways of doing business, but now the environment has forced people to do what they did not think was a way of doing business. And now it's become the new norm. So you had banks which never imagined that they could operate from outside of the premises. And then today it became that, okay, if you don't want to operate outside of your premises, you don't operate. But the world has to go on. So you bring technology to overcome all of those compliance and security concerns that existed before, but still there is an answer by technology. So I think this pandemic has really opened up possibilities that people never imagined before. And powering all of this is the technology, and the IT and the IT industry being the forefront of these technology drivers. I think it's just the beginning of a great time ahead. So the next 3-4 years, employment in the IT industry is just going to be far above than what was before.
Yeah, you make some really great points there, Brijesh, especially the fact that we were brought, I mean, the world was forced into being future forward. The COVID situation just changed our expectations, and any industry that was dependent on tech already was going to do well. And rightly, as you said, in our specific industry of IT, ITES, I think there are some good times ahead, and it's great to hear that you feel so as well. My next question is, if we look at CSS Corp, what are some of the major roles that you're hiring for right now or planning to hire for in the next 6 to 9 months?
Okay, so CSS is equally balanced on the IT side and the ITES side. So I'm sure that it's pretty common terminologies, the IT and ITES, but for someone who just want additional clarity. So the IT side of things are all about digital, all about AI, all about analytics, data, all about cloud infrastructure, all about mobility. All of that are the traditional ones of an application maintenance, support, re-engineering, and all of that. So that's the IT side of our business. And we've got two large units, which is the digital engineering services unit and the cloud and infrastructure unit. Those two is what are the IT business units of our company. And the same side, on the ITES side, which is the enterprise support for our consumer electronic and high-tech customers. So you have the entire tag business, which is all of your network, your product support, and all of that. And then we are also on the call center support, which is the end customer voice support or a chat support kind of thing. So we are a company that is equally balanced on all of these 4 business domains, that cuts across entirely of the ITES stuff. And what we've seen, so last year we grew about, when I say last year, the financial year that ended the March of 2020, we grew about 15% from the previous year. So, which is actually a really good growth, because typically IT industries today grow at single-digit numbers, but we grew at about 15%. And when the pandemic started, so actually when we started this financial year in April, it all started with a big gloomy picture saying that, oh, it's all going to be flat or negative and all of that. But our growth target is anywhere in the upward of 20%. So 20 to 25%, anywhere between that is actually we are targeting, and we are in the right track of it. So you can really understand that we're almost growing 1/4 of our size in the next 12 months, and that growth is a uniform and a unilateral growth across all of these areas. So whatever I mentioned about cloud, infrastructure, digital, analytics, data, AI, ML, mobility, or on the call center, on the tech business, we have growth coming in unilaterally across all of these areas.
It's really great to hear that you're hoping to grow 25% next year. That's a great target. And I'm sure it will, just to let the viewers know that a growth like that has to be driven not just by the organization, but also by growing the number of people in the organization. And I'm sure for any of the divisions that Brijesh said, CSS Corp will be hiring. So it's always great to hear that news. Now, just to add to this, any specific locations that you're looking at to be hiring for these roles, but also I want to be very wary of the fact that a lot of companies are pivoting towards a very hybrid workforce. So this is a loaded question, if you will, because maybe location is the wrong term here. But are there any specific locations? Is CSS Corp planning to open up some of your roles for remote work? Like, how is your long-term workforce strategy looking like?
Yeah, so it is actually evolving every day, because as we are talking, more and more possibilities are coming out. We are in the services industry, so we of course have to take our customers in our confidence if on every step. Yeah, so if you're a pure product company, you could have your own unilateral decisions, but because we are in the services industry, you need to take the customer into confidence. But so our geographies of operation otherwise are US, India, Costa Rica, Manila. These are our four large centers: US, Costa Rica, India, and Manila. And then we also have presence in China, in other parts of Europe, in Singapore, and those are smaller centers. In Europe, we have a development center in Poland. We have smaller centers in UK. In Mauritius, we have a center, but those are smaller centers. But then the four large ones I said is where we are. And in India, we have physical offices out of Chennai, Bangalore, and Hyderabad. So the core hiring is going to be across these locations and across these different centers that I mentioned. But a lot of customers have now come and asked, saying that why don't you leverage the larger ecosystem, because there would have been people who have had location constraints and they may not have been able to work. Someone where our offices do not exist would have found it troublesome to relocate to work. And this, and of course, now we are all in a 24/7 or 365-day work from home mode till at least next year for now, which actually opens up, at least for the short term. There are many customers that have given us the allowance and permission to open up the possibility of other locations, but we still attach a base location because as a company we have not formed a policy that forever they can work from an location where our office do not exist. But I wouldn't discount that is a possibility as well. And then there are many changes that are happening. So a lot of companies which used to be, let's say, if there are companies operating out of US or UK or other parts of Europe, and wherein you had to have a large presence at their offices because they thought that there were discussions that they all had to be together, and you had to have a good amount of presence. Today they're all work from remote, right? And when you're working from remote, it doesn't really matter whether you are in UK or you are in Bangalore, right? As long as they work at the same time, they are in the agile work mode, they are all connected on a WebEx or a Zoom for that matter, it becomes a common work environment. So as we are speaking and as every month is unfolding, newer and newer possibilities are just coming up. And as a company, we are completely on the lookout for more and more liberal ways of working, but at the same time, keeping the key customer concerns of data privacy and secure work environment, all of that. So we will have to keep all of that in mind, and I'm sure that technology will give us a lot of power in doing these, and which we keep exploring out.
Thanks, Brijesh. Great answer. And one of the biggest takeaways is that I at least saw was the fact that the more liberal workforce, the opportunity to have a work from home, remote work, is of great benefit to both organizations as well as job seekers, giving organizations access to a talent pool they may not have considered in the past, and giving job seekers opportunities which they may not have had access. So it's great to hear that your customers are willing to work with you on taking those chances, which is always nice. My next question is, let's say if I were to apply for a job at CSS Corp, what would be the expectations of me in terms of in two terms? One is skill set and maybe work experience. Like, what is that expectation for CSS?
Okay, so the fundamental background that you need to have is an alignment to the role. So if I'm hiring in a, let's say I'm hiring for a mobility unit, I will want to have them possess those mobility skills. Or if I'm doing for a data role, I will need data scientist or data analyst. If it's for let's say a cloud, I would want them to be on a cloud, right? So which is pretty understandable about saying that you need to have an aligned technology skill. Again, so this I'm talking about people that come with experience. So we do a lot of fresher onboarding. In fact, I'm just running batches because people have just completed their degree, engineering or non-engineering backgrounds. They've just completed their exams and have started to onboard them and undergo their thing. So for them, it's about generic skills, about analytic skills, about interpersonal skills that we look and then onboard. And you actually do a lot of investments in training those people. So I would run a 45-day or a 75-day training program to get them skilled in those technologies before I onboard them. But I'm saying about if I'm actually taking market hires, experienced people, then you need to have a base technology alignment to the role that you're coming in for, right? But beyond that, and this is becomes a lot of deciders or a tiebreakers in terms of so we need to have a much more weightage on communication, because what's really become is gone are those days of IT industry wherein for the customers you still have to realize that Indian IT industry depends about 90% of the business to come outside of India. So we are a big hub of getting it serviced, but the revenue for any company, 90% of it comes from outside of India. So which essentially means that the customers are in other geographies, they were okay if they give a work and things get done, and the individuals didn't really matter about who was doing the work. But as IT industry has evolved and matured, the state that we are in, almost every engineer, every IT associate is exposed to the customer, either to the business customer or the end customer. And at that stage, along with the technology, the relevant technology skills, the communication becomes extremely important, because if you're not able to articulate, not able to communicate, that really takes a big gap in it. And especially in this virtual world, when you can't even have that proximity to go and explain things, everything has to be explained virtually, and communication becomes even more important. So there is a lot of emphasis on all kinds of communication, and what's called as the in working in teams. So along with IQ, we always say that EQ is important. So the EQ becomes important because teamwork and understanding about the whole dynamics of being in a team and getting together, and that becomes really important. And overall, the entire world is moving to an agile way of working. So the whole thing about working in isolation, not being part of a larger team, and if you're comfortable just by being an independent contributor in an isolation, I think that's also changing away now, because almost every work is today getting accomplished in a shorter duration by a collaborative workforce. So which essentially means that, so earlier you could actually just do your work for about 3 months and then submit saying this is my output, and it was okay. But today, almost every day or every second day, there is an interface that is required to say about, okay, what is that you have achieved, what is that you have done, how do you collaborate, and then move forward. So I think these couple of things, along with the technology or skill alignment, becomes really important. So one is the ability to work in an agile work environment, the teamwork and the EQ part comes into play, and then finally the communication part comes into play. So these is becoming more and more important now that we have gone into a virtual world of working, and this is becoming more and more important. And that our hiring criteria have also changed, because we've started giving even more focus to these aspects than before.
Sorry, I was on mute. Yes, thanks, Brijesh. I think it's really important to acknowledge the fact that EQ is something that job seekers should be looking at improving. And it's not an easy thing to improve or develop, but it is possible. And if you're one of the viewers, and and it's not just, I'm sure, from CSS Corp, but many organizations are looking for empathetic, EQ forward job seekers, especially because of the COVID situation, making it, virtual work becoming the primary form of working. So I think, thanks for that answer. I think the job seekers can really learn from that one. My next question is a very specific one. Has CSS Corp made any major changes to the assessment and interview process for candidates during this pandemic?
Oh, entirely. So, and that's why I said that. So, and it just so happened that early this year, we were in fact evaluating a lot of platforms. So I have got two roles. Of I on one side head the digital unit of the company. So I have this whole way of using technology, using especially the digital technology to enhance customer experience on one end. And then I always want that if we could do that for the customers, then why shouldn't we implement it internally for all our operations and processes? So because I head on one side the digital unit and also the talent acquisition. So last many months, even before the pandemic, we were actually rebranding or redoing the way in which we would be able to do talent acquisition. So right from sourcing of the candidates, the processing of it, the onboarding of it, the assessment of it, the onboarding of it, and the final experience of it, right? So one of the things that I've always wanted to get introduced was a very, very strong, stable platform of virtually doing almost everything. So you could virtually do assessments. So rather than having a panel go through the same kind of assessment to all the potential candidates, if you could have technology and products and tools to be doing that, it makes a big difference. So in fact, the tool that I chose is called Talview. It's one of the leading ones. There are lot many tools out in the market, but for our need, we found Talview to be aligned with what we wanted to really achieve. So in fact, we almost shortlisted on Talview around the around the time. But I'm sure that would have got delayed if the pandemic had not happened at that point of time. But because the lockdown happened, we had to implement that in overnight kind of stuff. But then we were prepared because we have done all of that. So, and that's the reason why I said that when almost every company that I know about in India, all large companies and almost everyone froze the recruitment. And in fact, they came out and said public statements saying that we are freezing recruitment, we are delaying onboarding. So almost no onboarding or recruitment activity happened between April 1st to mid of May. For those 45 days, the entire recruitment thing was frozen. But I can actually proudly say that we did not freeze it for a single day. So we had people onboarded. In fact, I still remember on the first week of April, I onboarded 72 people. And that was like the first onboarding of the month as planned. So April month, the first week itself, I onboarded people, and then it continued. But so the reason is because you could do entire function, and you can imagine the functions that you need to onboard, because people, there are assessments on one side, there are interviews that needs to happen, and you need to have a proctored way of doing interviews, because the fraud is possible all around. So you need to make sure that, and then so you do all of that, and then it is all under the security measure that, okay, once people are going to come to the office, then we can physically verify all of those documents, and then you can ensure that that's correct. But then when are they going to come in physically? So you need to have your entire checks and balances in place, which can again be done virtually, right? So all those things have to be converted into a virtual world. You still have to make sure that you don't dilute any of those measures that you would want to evaluate and scrutinize a candidate for, but you still go ahead. So essentially the entire life cycle of sourcing, assessment, screening, interview, multiple kinds of interview for that matter, you use tools for that. So in fact, and that's why I said that technology can really change the way in which we do it. We have to bring in the legal department also into confidence. We have to bring in the entire other parts of HR department into confidence, and we put that in. So now if I really look at it, the benefits of using the technology and tools is really multifold, because if you use tools and assessment mechanisms, you can actually take away a lot of bandwidth of the routine, mundane work from a panelist, because they're going to ask the same question. Instead, you can have an entire MCQ which can do the assessments in a much better way. You can give you all kinds of analysis and trends, and then if you want to still go ahead and overrule something, you always have the option to do that. So I would think that today, in fact, in the last 7 months, I have onboarded 2,500 people entirely virtually.
That is like really heartening to hear. Not just that you've onboarded 2,500 people in this last few months, but the fact that regardless of what was happening, like even with the pandemic, y'all were able to go ahead and do it, and that's great to hear. And I'm sure a lot of job seekers would also, some of our viewers will be happy to know that. And I think the next question is purely for our viewers, and I'm sure it will help them the most. Any easy tips for candidates that can potentially help them stand out in a CSS Corp virtual interview? Do you have any tips for that?
So, so beyond whatever I've said, that skills that you possess, right? You have to be fundamentally strong on whatever core role you're looking for. I talked about the softer skill aspects of it, but especially about virtual interview, and this is something that becomes really, really important, is that there is an air of suspicion on the panelist on the other side, right, about a potential candidate, because you're not really virtually seeing them, or because you're not physically seeing them, right? So till today, in almost every company, even if you had, let's say, 3 rounds of interview, they would say 1 round face-to-face is mandatory, because that is 1 round of almost being able to be sure, and this is human tendency. This is human tendency of a suspicion. That's always the thinking that, oh, the other person is trying to make an easy route, to make a fraud, right? So today you have to understand that that's taken away. So everyone that's doing an interview has this suspicion, and I'm saying the panelist has a suspicion whether is the person on the other side trying to make a fraud. And any action from your side that creates a suspicion actually will really go bad. So if you're in a virtual interview, you really need to make sure that you are in a well-lit ambient room, your network is really good, you do not allow your voice to be broken, your video to be broken, because any of those unnecessarily given tendency for the panelists to think that, oh, someone is playing with me, right? And you shouldn't look here and there, because then they might think that someone is prompting you answers, right? Now, nothing might be really happening, but this becomes, because we've not really thought about all these aspects, because it didn't really matter, right? Now, even if 2 interviews you had given before the pre-lockdown world, the panelist would always think that, okay, fine, that at some time the person is going to come to the office and we will examine the genuinity and the validity at that point of time. But today it doesn't exist. So all decisions have to be made virtually. So I would think that the ability to be cognizant that you are being evaluated in a virtual world, which is still not an established world yet. So even though that's a reality, people's thinking is still as if it's looked with a bit of suspicion. So you have to do that extra step to not bring in a single thought of suspicion, and that's really, really, really important. And let me just to. So I was in fact, and which is brilliant. I in fact called the bank and congratulated them for doing that. So I was recently opening him an account because I had some paperwork that to be done, and so I was actually opening up a account in HDFC Bank. So you can imagine, right? Bank is one of those really sacred ones wherein they have to have a physical presence before an account is opened. Now, because of the lockdown, RBI told banks that, well, you have to allow accounts to be opened in a completely virtual world, and that's where the eKYC came in, right? So the eKYC and the video KYC. So earlier eKYC was just electronic, but now the video KYC is coming. The entire credentials have to be validated. So you can almost do everything, and then there is a candidate interview. So not candidate, actually, your
customer in this case,
potential customer interview, right? And then they ask you to show your Aadhaar card or validity, and then they ask you to sign in front of them and then show that. Now, I was on my laptop and my phone was actually ringing. So at that point of time, and look at the timing, at that point of time, the person was asking me 2 security questions. This was at the beginning. So they'll ask, what is your maiden name? What is your mobile number, right? And my phone was ringing, and I actually took my phone from the side and I was putting it on silent. But because my eyes went to the phone while I was answering what was my mobile number and the mother's maiden name, the person said, I have to cut this call now because I think that you're looking somewhere and reading the answer. My entire intention was just to silence the phone. But I'm saying that split-second reaction is enough for... And the same thing could happen with a panelist, right? That split-second thing could think that, oh, you're looking somewhere and then giving an answer, or you're doing some fraud. So I think that has to be cognizant in every job seeker, in making sure that you are in a new world of being evaluated. So be cognizant of that fact.
Thanks so much, Brijesh. And I appreciate you sharing that personal anecdote. Just goes to show that even though we have shifted a lot of our work to a virtual world, it will take some time before mindsets catch up and make it easier. So we have to be completely cognizant of that. I mean, this interview itself is a great example. Last year, we would have done this face to face. and live streamed it everywhere. Now we are both sitting at home in different cities and taking it. So we have to, our mindsets have to change, and a lot has to do to catch up with that. On that note, we'll just, I'm being very cognizant of time, so I thought we'll jump over to some of the viewers' questions so that we get an opportunity to cover a few of them. So I know viewers, I asked you to put in these questions. A lot of you have put in and they're popping up on my screen. By the way, just before we get really started on that, I just want to let you know, you can apply for jobs at CSS Corp. There is a link provided in the comments. It's pinned on the top of the comments. You can start looking at jobs at CSS Corp. And in case you missed that, now a link to the jobs are also live on the campaign page, and it's showing up right now on our screen as well. So CSS Corp is hiring. They're doing a phenomenal job of hiring virtually. And Brijesh has given you so many tips. So please go ahead, apply for these jobs. They exist. So I'm just going to start off with one very interesting question, Brijesh, and it's something that I have also personally thought about for my personal thing. Are there any tips and tricks to sort of help a resume stand out? And the reason the viewer has asked this question is there's major concern in not getting a call back unless through a referral process. A lot of job seekers are under the impression that only referrals work. I mean, the reality is it's much more nuanced than that. But is there any way they can make sure that their resume stands out?
So just to be on record, or just to be on giving out the record. So in a lot of organizations, referrals do operate at about 30 to 40%, but that's actually the best case. In an average thing, if you do, it's about 20%. So you still have to do about 80% of the hiring from the market, right? And the profile do have to make a difference. The answer, or the tip, if you ask me, is that if you are able to write your own resume without looking at any template and without copying it from anyone else, it's actually going to stand out. The problem that we all make is we believe that there is a template, there is a right way of putting all the jargons out, right? And it becomes so much mundane and cliched for the person who is looking at it, right? That because, so what would have happened is someone would have written a resume in what they think is a very stylish way, because some website would have said that this is how resumes stand out. And you know what? 1,000 people or 10,000 people are going to see the same website. They're going to write the same resume in the same way, right? And a panelist would have, let's say, gone through 2 candidates. And when they interview those candidates, they would think that there is hardly anything that is matching between what's written down there and what they have, right? Now, unfortunately, if the next set of 10 resumes are also going to come in the same format, they are almost going to prejudge that, okay, this candidate is also the same kind, right? So if you're writing a resume and if you want to take the biggest tip is that please write it from ground zero. Please write it from scratch. And please write it in your words. Please write it in what you would want to describe about yourself, because each one has a story. There is no templatized story. There is no story that you have to copy from another one of telling others as to what did you do, right? And you just be clear on what is your strength, because do not think that you can actually be selected with a fluke of luck, right? Because if you're lucky, then you better take a lottery and you can win that. But don't try that luck with this, because the other thing you also have to realize is just getting into a job is not the end of it, because today you're getting evaluated every day. You have to prove yourself of what your output is, and that's why I said that the world has changed, that it has become an agile world. It's become an output that you have to produce almost every day or every other day. So it's important that you bring in the right story, you get into the role with the right right story that you're talking about yourself, and you continue to do well in the role. So that to me is the biggest tip that I can give, saying that write it on your own. It's fine, one pager, two pager, just describe about all of the things that you have done, and just describe about what are you really good at. Not just because your colleague said that some flashy technologies, React.js, AI, ML, and all of that, and if you write it here, don't think it's going to give you the outcome.
Thanks for bringing that up, Brijesh. I think we do not give as much importance to something as a resume. I think a lot of people spend only. I think our research shows that everyone spends maybe 10 or 20 minutes on a resume before sending it out, which doesn't sound like a lot of time. It should be something more important. My next question, I'm just going to take a couple more questions and we can end it there. Can you talk a bit about diversity and inclusion plans at CSS Corp? Like, what are your plans for that?
So we've been really aware, cognizant, and wanting to drive the message. So and that's why I said that. So diversity in terms of culture, diversity in terms of the nationality that we bring in, diversity in terms of the gender that we bring in. We've been extremely careful, and we need to drive it, because there is always a tendency to just take an easier path when not really forced to do something, right? So but that will always not be the right thing to do. So you will always have to make sure that the typical norms that get followed may not be the right one for bringing in diversity, which essentially means that you have to drive this message out, right? So in our when we are hiring people in each of those geographies, we want to make sure that it is local employment that is given, which really brings in the entire nationality diversity, ethnic diversity, and all of that into the company, and also bringing in the gender diversity into the mix for that, right? We make sure that every job is equally accessible and equally operational by anyone. So it doesn't, we're making sure that a lady employee has got the exact same set of leverage of a job as a male employee, or vice versa, right? Be it in a different region, the language shouldn't be a barrier for doing that, right? So those aspects, and we are in this world wherein if you don't really take this as one of your core actionable items, it will not happen, because it will fall through the crack. So from our CEO down to every executive and the whole management and the leadership team, it is driven from that, saying that diversity is what really brings in the strength of a company, and it has to be driven to ensure that it's followed. And we are pretty proud to say that in terms of all of the flavors of diversity, we stand out in terms of all measurable parameters of diversity. You're on mute.
Sorry. Yes. Sorry. Thanks for that, Brijesh. It was really great to hear CSS Corp's, commitment to diversity. And my last question for the day, and this is a very interesting one, and I know a lot of people always have it. Is it skill sets or pedigree that matters to someone, for someone to join CSS Corp? What is CSS Corp Lookout?
Yeah, so I don't think there's any definite one answer that I want to pick, but it's always the right fit for the right role, right? Because each role in a services industry is going to have its flavor. It's going to have its flavor of a customer priority. So you could be really good in one technology, but then the customer expectation from that role could be different, or an organization's eh, interest for a particular role could be slightly different, and people will always, or organizations will always try to get the right fit for the right job. So again, so if you do not qualify for a particular role, for a particular position, it in no way conveys that, oh, you're lacking something, or you are someone who's got a gap. It's not really that, because everyone are born gifted, and everyone acquire knowledge and acquire skills. It is that there is a flavor of job, which doesn't mean that this flavor is superior than the other flavor also, but it is actually just a flavor, right? Because each one decides to do our own role. So I decided to become an engineer. Rohan has decided to become doing on the HR front of it, and each one can do that. Right now, me or Rohan cannot say that what we are doing is superior to each other. So similarly, you could be working on Java, you could be working on Angular, you could be working on React.js, you could be working on a cloud, right? The role, when we are hiring for a particular role, that will have a flavor, that will have a certain aspect, right? You may not be selected for that particular one because it meant that we were looking for 8 out of 10 on this, 6 out of 10 on that, and another one on that. That's all it matters. So, and I think it's just a moving game. And gone are those days when you would get onto a job and you would think that that's the end of your life, right? Because there are previous generations that work. In fact, I'm actually now become the previous generation than the current job seekers. But when I'm saying, I said my previous generation. So when my parents were working, for them, actually getting a job was about, okay, now think about post-retirement thing, because their entire 30 or 35 years were taken for granted, saying that they're just going to do that, right? But from us, that change started, and from now, it's just going to change over and over and over again. Every company will reimagine themselves and redo themselves in every 5 years. And a job seeker would do a job either in the same company or in a different company at almost a similar frequency, which essentially means that nothing is constant. So it's completely constantly changing. So I would think that what's really required are the basic skills, and of those softer aspects that I talked about. And as long as you work towards improving your core strength in technology, in communication, in the EQ, in being able to work in a team, you are in the right track, right? And you just have to. You could be delayed in getting onto it in a month or 2 months, but then the right job is just waiting for you around the corner. And that's the mindset you always have to keep, saying that if I'm good at it, I'm going to really get what I want. It might be just a few more weeks or a few more months, but it's always there.
Sorry. Thanks, Brijesh. No, that's completely right. I think this changing nature of the world implies that job seekers need to change with the times. It's not just about what skill sets you have. It's about how much you're willing to improve on those skill sets. And I'm sure that's going to be a big part of everything going forward. With that question and that answer, it brings us to the end of our session. I would just like to say thank you so much, Brijesh, for your time and your valuable answers. Some of them, I'm sure, job seekers will be able to use to get their next role at CSS Corp or any other organization. I think some of the explanations that you gave are very valuable to all job seekers. Thank you so much for being a part of it. And I apologize to the viewers if I couldn't answer your question, get to your question. But there are other sessions out there. Please do join us again. We'll be live once again at 4 p.m. today with Lowe's. So please don't forget to tune in then. See you shortly. And thanks once again, Brijesh.
Yeah, so thank you, Rohan. And I would to everyone watching out there, I would say that this is an opportunity for you to actually become part of the fastest growing and the most awarded ITES company in the world today. So we a number of things that are there. So thank you all for being part of this 1 hour session. Thanks a lot, Rohan. And I'm assuming that we will get a good number of matching profiles, and you get the right fit and the right role match to do it. Yeah. Thank you
Great.
all.
Thanks, Brijesh. Take care.
Bye.